2,000 years ago, a legend was born. A man named Elgar stood alone against the darkness, defeating the Demon King with a single, earth-shattering swing of his blade. In the present day, a young boy stares at the pages of history with stars in his eyes, clutching his book and cheering, "I'm gonna be strong, just like him." Yeah. He admired the heroes of old, but destiny has a funny way of playing out. But that dream didn't exactly age well. That boy grew up and became a pathetic old man. Meet Louis Alzeid. At 39 years old, he's a bottom-tier E-rank adventurer with nothing to show for it but a tired face. He senses the vibration in the air and mutters, "This is bad." Outside, the peace of the Imperial capital Saxandria is shattered. The alarms scream that this is an emergency. It's a monster attack. Louis and his partner watch the smoke rise as she gasps, "No way! An attack!" Chaos erupts in the streets below. Guards shout for civilians to evacuate as families scramble for safety. The reality of war has finally hit the capital's doorstep. The order comes from the top. Everyone from the guild, please head to the south gate to respond. Alicia Carfey, an 18-year-old unranked adventurer, is ready to move. "Mr. Louis, let's go too." Louis just gives a weary, hollow smile. "I know, but still." He looks at her with defeated eyes. "There's no point in weaklings like us sticking our necks out." Alicia tries to find the words to argue. She knows deep down that his assessment of their strength is right. Louis turns away, his mind only on survival. He tells her that getting hurt for nothing won't pay the bills. Louis looks at the brutal ranking system. He's dead last at rank E, and his partner is completely unranked. Alicia grabs his arm and drags him toward the gate. She shouts that they won't know their potential unless they try. Louis sighs, feeling every bit of his age. He believes retreating to find a safer task is the best move. He scratches his head in exhaustion and reminds Alicia that she is still young. He looks back at a life of pointless effort. He remembers years of gathering herbs and failing his exams. He truly believes that nothing good has ever happened to him. Louis looks at her with a sad, empty expression. He tells her to go by herself because she might actually have potential. Alicia is stunned and struggles to process his words. The waterworks start immediately. She screams that she can't do it alone and will die instantly without him. She clings to him and sobs about how they've been fighting together. Louis panics and tries to reason with her about the dangers of a real battlefield. She ignores him and drags him along anyway. Alicia stops with tears streaming down her face. She makes a final desperate plea to get stronger. Louis freezes as he sees a ghost of his younger self in her eyes. He realizes she is just like he used to be. He exhales and mutters about what a handful she is. The old man stands up straight as a spark of life finally returns. He asks if she wants to save the city. Alicia is shocked by his change in heart as he starts sprinting toward the danger. Louis lays out the plan as they run. He wants to stay in the back and only aim for the wounded monsters. Alicia is back in high spirits and ready for the challenge. They arrive at the Imperial capital South Gate. The scale of the disaster is finally revealed to them. The laughter stops. Louis gasps as he sees a soldier bloodied and broken in the street. This is no longer a drill. Louis enters survival mode and tells her this is what real war looks like. He places a hand on Alicia's head to calm her down as she struggles to process the carnage. A squad of regular army soldiers appears before them. The soldier is frantic because casualties are high. His relief vanishes the moment he recognizes Louis as the Immovable E. The insult stings because even the army knows his reputation. The soldier scoffs and says there is no point asking him for anything. Louis can only sigh and remind them he is still an adventurer. He feels the weight of his years of stagnation. The soldier points at the gate and tells Louis to handle the goblins they failed to kill. Louis accepts the task without hesitation. Louis asks why the army is struggling. He learns the high rankers are all away on an important mission. The city is undefended. The soldier runs back into the fight and calls him a scared old man. Alicia is fuming, but Louis just smiles. The Immovable E is finally forced to move. Alicia is absolutely fuming after being mocked by a passing knight. She screams at the top of her lungs while Louis tells her to watch her language. He tries to keep things grounded, reminding her that goblin hunting is still an important mission despite the lack of glamour. Striking a dramatic pose, the girl points her wand forward and confidently tells her partner to leave all the support magic to her. Louis gives her a smirk, joking that she sure talks big for someone of her rank, while he grips his massive blade. A flashback reveals him as a young boy swinging a long eastern tachi with wide-eyed wonder. He admits he can't exactly tell her that he's only been using the sword for the aesthetic since he was a kid. Back in the present, he settles into a sharp combat stance with the curved blade humming into position. Alicia claps and cheers, convinced he looks like a seasoned veteran, but he just tells her she's being too noisy. Suddenly, a panicked knight shouts that goblins have escaped toward them, leaving the Immovable E team as the last line of defense. A lone goblin charges forward with a wooden club. looking completely baffled by the duo standing in its way. The two adventurers prepare for a showdown against the tiny monster, roaring with a level of intensity that is totally ridiculous for an E-rank fight. Alicia begins an epic incantation, calling upon a gruesome power sealed since ancient times. She extends her hand, commanding the fire to awaken and obey her will. But only a pathetic spark drifts from her fingers, fizzling out as the goblin watches with a blank stare. Lewis loses his cool and screams at her to stop muttering nonsense, shouting that she doesn't need to chant every single time. The goblin seizes the moment and swings its club, sending him stumbling backward as Alicia mocks him for being out of breath. He lunges forward in a desperate counterattack, delivering a brutal body slam directly into the creature's chest. As the monster goes flying, Lewis orders his partner to fire her magic right now. She ignores the urgency and starts the long, dramatic chant all over again, leaving him to scream in frustration. Several dozen minutes later, the enemy finally lies dead on the ground while the exhausted heroes gasp for air. Lewis pulls up his status window, staring at his hand and admitting how pathetic it feels to struggle against a single goblin. The screen shows his low stats, confirming that his numbers haven't changed in years, while he wonders what the BSA note even means. Alicia looks downcast, wondering if the two of them have actually gotten any stronger at all. He stares at his palm, noting that normally the more you fight, the more you should grow. They walk through the woods together, lamenting their total lack of talent. Lewis suddenly stops, spotting a wounded monster crawling toward a stone well in the distance. He watches the creature disappear, wondering why a monster would ever hide in a well. Lewis looms over the dark opening of the well, recalling the rumors that it was stripped of its ladder because the maze-like tunnels inside lead to a dead end. His mind flashes back to a younger version of himself digging through dusty archives, uncovering an old history book that tells a much different story. The truth is hidden in the shadows. A secret passage has existed beneath the capital since ancient times, carved out specifically for the royal family. By reciting a certain incantation, a sturdy stone wall ripples away to reveal a hidden path leading straight to the Imperial Castle. A vision of the royals fleeing through the dark confirms his realization. This is no dead end. It is a secret emergency passage. Lewis turns on a dime and declares they are heading to the castle, leaving Alicia squatting in the grass with her flowers, completely baffled by the sudden change of plans. Refusing to meet her gaze, he stares off into the distance and insists there is something he needs to check immediately. The knight removes his helmet, his face drenched in sweat as he admits he's never heard of a secret tunnel, but Lewis pushes forward, determined to verify the castle's safety while the main army is away. A dark, fractured reflection of Lewis appears in the background, its hollow eyes mocking him and asking if he's just tired and looking for an excuse to go home after killing a single goblin. He forces the dark thoughts away and raises a hand to the knight, apologizing for the trouble as he prepares to head back. Alicia pops her head out from behind a heavy wooden crate, looking startled as Lewis turns his head and catches her peeking at him. Alicia looks up at him with a worried expression, but he waves her off, claiming he's always been this way and her concern doesn't bother him anymore. The two of them sprint toward the massive, imposing gates of the Imperial Castle, which stands eerily silent under a cloudy sky. Lewis pushes forward with his hand on his sword, noting the total absence of soldiers, while strange noises echo from within, forcing him to signal Alicia to stop in her tracks. They step into a hallway of horrors, finding the floor littered with the bodies of fallen soldiers. Lewis stares at the carnage and tells Alicia this is where they part ways. He urges her to stay hidden until the commotion dies down, but she clutches her chest and screams that she's an adventurer too, begging him to let her stay. Without a word or a glance, he drives his fist into her stomach. The impact sounds with a heavy thud as her eyes go wide with shock. He catches her as she collapses into his arms unconscious, offering a quiet apology and a word of thanks before turning toward the darkness to face the threat alone. Deep inside the castle, a massive stone hallway is filled with the echoes of clashing steel. A single soldier is surrounded and desperately fighting off a horde of monsters. The monsters press their advantage, clashing their weapons against the lone defender as blood splatters across the floor. The soldier grits her teeth in agony, her face drenched in sweat and covered in scratches as she struggles to hold the line. She drives her blade downward, impaling a fallen monster into the stone floor to steady herself, while a terrifying skeleton in a tattered cape looms over her. Sakuya Blackness, sub-leader of the regular army, stands battered but defiant. She realizes she might be the only soldier left standing against this impossible horde. She watches as goblins and skeletons swarm over her fallen comrades, realizing the attack on the south gate was a deadly diversion. Looking at her blood-stained sword, she knows there must be a mastermind behind this coordinated strike. Her eyes fill with a dark resolve as she realizes the truth too late, but she refuses to back down. Sakuya stares ahead with fierce determination, vowing to protect the Emperor and the citizens, even if she has to cough up her last drop of blood. She offers a defiant smirk to her enemies, mocking them for underestimating her as she prepares for one final stand. With a sudden burst of speed, she parries a skeleton spear and delivers a powerful counterstrike, noting that these monsters aren't actually that strong. Sakuya cleaves through the front line with a wide horizontal slash, shouting that she will definitely find a way out of this nightmare. A metallic ring echoes through the hall as a surprise projectile strikes Sakuya's blade. The force of the hidden strike knocks her sword clean out of her hands. A goblin archer pulls its bowstring tight, revealing the source of the long-range attack. The skeleton warrior seizes the opening, raising its massive sword toward the disarmed soldier. Sakuya drops into a low crouch as the heavy blade whistles through the air directly above her. Sparks erupt as Lewis suddenly bursts into the frame, parrying the skeleton's lethal strike just in time. The massive skeleton is forced back as Lewis steps in to shield the fallen sub-leader. Looking up from the ground, Sakuya recognizes the man as the Immovable E, while he gasps for air and tells her to go call for reinforcements instead of him. Sakuya snatches up her blade from the floor and shouts back, asking if he wants to die. She tells him that if he wants to call for backup, he should go do it himself. Lewis scratches his cheek and lets out a tired sigh, muttering that every single one of these monsters is a problem. With his face hidden in shadow, Lewis reveals a grim truth. He admits that no one came to help, even when he asked them earlier. Sakuya listens with wide eyes and sweat on her face as Lewis explains that nothing the Immovable E says has a shred of credibility. He orders her to go call the others while he handles the front line, prompting Sakuya to realize there is no other way. Lewis gets right in her face and roars at the top of his lungs. He fiercely demands to know if she is really okay with letting the entire castle fall. Sakuya stares at her sparking, blood-stained hand and states she must protect the castle, but protests that an E-rank adventurer cannot handle this horde. Lewis instantly drops his intense demeanor, deadpanning as he calls her an idiot and orders her to stop talking nonsense and just go. Lewis stands with his back turned to Sakuya, gripping his sword. He declares that it is the duty of the older generation to lead the young ones onto the right path. Sakuya sprints away down the corridor, her thought bubbles revealing her deep regret for misunderstanding Lord Louis Alzeid. She admits she let rumors decide her opinion, before shouting back to wish him luck in battle. Her boots pound against the stone floor as she dashes forward. She angrily calls herself pathetic for failing to see the man's true character. She suddenly skids to a halt when she spots a figure slumped against the wall. She peers down in surprise and asks aloud if the girl is a survivor. Sakuya immediately crouches down and grabs the unconscious girl by the shoulders. She shakes her violently and screams at her to wake up. Back in the blood-stained hallway, the skeleton warrior lets out a hollow roar. It charges forward relentlessly with its massive shield held high. Lewis manages to block the strike, but the impact nearly overwhelms his guard. He grits his teeth, stunned by how incredibly fast the monster is. A devastating shield bash catches Lewis completely off guard, sending him flying backward through the air. He thinks to himself that no matter what miracle happens, he probably cannot win. He crashes hard against the stone floor, a spray of blood erupting from his mouth as the monster closes in. He thinks back to his vow to become a strong man like a hero, admitting that he deserves to be laughed at. The skeleton warrior stands triumphantly over the fallen adventurer, raising its sword to deliver the final execution. Lewis lies helpless on the floor, agonizing over the fact that he couldn't even buy any time. Suddenly, a bolt of black magical energy streaks through the hallway, narrowly missing the skeleton's skull. The projectile leaves a thick trail of dark smoke in the air as the skeleton shouts in surprise. Lewis looks up in shock as a tiny spark of fire pops harmlessly against the skeleton's shield. The monster pauses, turning its attention away from Lewis. Realizing the skeleton is momentarily distracted, Lewis lunges forward with a desperate roar. He pushes past his injuries, declaring that now is his only chance. With a final desperate strike, Lewis violently shatters the skeleton into a pile of clattering bones. The enemy's skull bounces harmlessly across the stone floor. He sits among the dusty wreckage, gasping heavily for breath. He looks around in disbelief, asking aloud if he actually won. Alicia stands trembling in the corridor, her wand smoking and tears streaming down her face. Lewis scolds her for showing up to a battlefield she can't even win, reminding her he was fighting alone for a reason. Without another word, Alicia sprints forward and throws her arms around Lewis in a crushing hug. He lets out a startled shout, completely caught off guard by the sudden embrace. She buries her face deeply into his shoulder while he scratches his cheek in confusion. He listens quietly as she explains that she heard the situation from Sakuya when she woke her up. Tears stream down Alicia's face as she screams, asking if he planned on sacrificing himself to protect the people who have looked down on him all this time. Lewis looks back in shock as Alicia demands to know why he won't try to protect himself, since he protects her so dearly. Alicia grabs Lewis by the shoulders and boldly declares that she came to protect him. She tells him he is going to take responsibility for making a woman worry once they get back alive. Alicia looks away with a flushed, pouting face while Lewis deadpans and calls her an idiot. A gentle smile forms on Lewis's face as he realizes this is the first time anyone has ever saved or worried about him. Staring down the menacing goblin horde, Lewis asks if she thinks it is even possible to get back alive in this situation. He states that he doesn't know what will happen, but he will definitely see it through to the end. Lewis readies his sword with a fierce smile, praising Alicia's spirit and telling her they will fight with everything they have. Alicia grips her wand, enthusiastically agreeing to head into battle. A massive digital interface suddenly materializes in front of Lewis. A loud electronic chime echoes through the hall as a text box announces his level has increased. A chibi version of Lewis looks completely baffled by the sudden alert, then stares at the glowing digital screen in pure shock, questioning if his level actually just went up. He thinks back to his desperate victory, wondering if this happened because he defeated that skeleton swordsman just now. A new text box appears on the interface, announcing the acquisition of a brand new skill called Unconditional Victory, and Lewis stares intensely at the glowing prompt as the system asks if he would like to use the newly acquired skill. Lewis breaks into a nervous sweat, completely bewildered that he even acquired a skill and wondering what it could possibly be. He notes that he has never read or heard of a skill called Unconditional Victory before. He explains that skills are only supposed to play a supporting role in combat. Visualizing standard magical abilities, he reasons that the skill should only have basic effects like boosting attack power or adding a poison attribute. Left with no other choice against the horde, Lewis draws his sword and declares that right now he has to try anything. He officially calls out the skill activation for Unconditional Victory. Lewis grips his sword as thick steam suddenly pours off his body, noting that the aura feels incredibly hot. A look of pure shock and excitement washes over his face as he realizes the intense heat actually feels good. He swings his blade with effortless grace, amazed that he can move freely when his body previously couldn't keep up with the swing of the touchy. Lewis drops into a low, aggressive stance as a dark aura trails from his glowing eye. He calls out the first form of the Mind's Eye one-sword style. Lewis violently swings his sword in a massive sweeping arc. He unleashes a devastating attack called Ultimate Gale, creating a massive tornado of slicing wind that instantly shreds the goblins to pieces. A surviving goblin raises its heavy wooden club, preparing to strike down the adventurer. Lewis instantly appears right in front of the creature. He calls the monster too slow as he effortlessly slices it in half. An extreme close-up reveals a swirling hypnotic pattern manifesting inside Lewis's eye. Lewis dashes through the battlefield at blinding speed. He leaves a trail of blood and severed monsters in his wake as he massacres the entire horde. The Mind's Eye one-sword style is known as the absolute strongest technique, a legendary art that only the hero Elgar could use 2,000 years ago, as Lewis continues his relentless assault, stating that he thought the devastating technique was only a story found in legends. A flashback shows a young boy happily reading a book as Lewis realizes the legendary style actually existed, and pushing forward with explosive power, he declares his sheer disbelief that he is actually wielding the legendary technique himself. Lewis stands triumphantly atop a massive mountain of slaughtered goblins. Thick steam continues to roll off his shoulders and bloody blade as he surveys the aftermath. A close-up shows Lewis catching his breath. He looks completely exhausted but victorious as the steam slowly dissipates from his body. Alicia stands frozen in place, her mouth hanging wide open in utter disbelief at the sheer scale of the carnage. Lewis looks back at her with a blank, exhausted expression while steam continues to radiate off his skin. Alicia points a trembling finger at him, frantically demanding to know what is going on. Lewis slowly approaches her, casually explaining that his level suddenly went up and he got a strange skill. Alicia suddenly lunges forward and tackles Lewis into a massive hug, enthusiastically congratulating him on the level up. Lewis blushes and awkwardly notes that her chest is touching him. A chibi Lewis looks completely overwhelmed by the affection, while Alicia continues to cling to him tightly. Lewis stares down at his gloved hand with a gentle smile and a drop of sweat on his face, admitting to himself that he is happy about the level up, but knows there is no way a simple stat boost would make him this incredibly strong. Alicia beams brightly and playfully claims that this victory is thanks to her too, while Lewis focuses on his new power, concluding that the Unconditional Victory skill must be the true reason behind his sudden, overwhelming strength. A vision of his brutal assault flashes by as he effortlessly slices through the goblin horde, reflecting on his past weakness and feeling completely amazed that he could defeat so many enemies in an instant with a cheat-like skill he barely understands. He then tightly clenches his fist, a confident and hopeful smile shining on his battered face as visions of his hopeful childhood and grueling past fade behind him, realizing all those years of hardship actually meant something, and proudly declaring in his mind that even a bottom-tier old man can finally become a strong man like a hero.